A very warm welcome to today's Thinking Talks, the video podcast of the Wilfried Martin Center for European Studies in Brussels. My name is Peter Hefele. I'm the policy director of the center. Who had thought 3 years ago that Europe, once created as a project for peace, would now heavily invest into rearmament, finally being able to defend its own territory? And the shockwave sent over the Atlantic since the new Trump administration has come to power has profoundly questioned our idea of what Europe should be and what we can take for granted. Shared values and security, not longer provided by a benevolent big brother, the United States, embodied in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. With a debate on European security, the future of NATO cannot be left out of the equations. And for that reason, the Wilfried Martin Center has just recently released a study, an extensive analysis on the future of NATO, demise, reform or rebirth. And I'm very delighted to welcome today the author of the study, Mrs. Dr. Gerlinde Niehus. Welcome to the Martin Center and welcome to our Thinking Talks.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Mrs. Niehus, you have a long and extensive, impressive career at NATO and European institutions. You worked more than 25 years in the wide field of security, diplomacy, and in your last position at NATO, you had been the Deputy Director of Defense Cooperation till 2024, and you oversee all the NATO's engagement with partner countries. Mrs. Niehus, we have seen the conclusion of the historic NATO summit in The Hague a couple of weeks ago, and every allied agreed to spend now up to 5% of its GDP for defense and security by 2035. Do you really think this goal is achievable, or is it just a pretty headline to place?
Well, first, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. If you allow, indeed, over the 25 years, I was involved in something like close to 20 summits of NATO. So, and in that perspective, the one in The Hague was a particularly low point in NATO's summit history. In many ways, I would say, characterized by European submission and hollowness. So the summit leitmotifs, and that brings me to the 5% GDP, impersonated in particular by Secretary General Rutte, was really Trump appeasement. Yeah? And the focus on the new defense spending plan as the summit's dominating topic was mainly to fabricate a Trump victory. Yeah? So it allowed allies and Secretary General to underline that the agreement of 5% GDP is an achievement of Donald Trump, and it allowed Donald Trump to claim just that. Yeah? So a victory for all of them. But at the same time, and that's why I say hollowness, the summit avoided at least three broader strategic issues. Just to mention them. It excluded the existential issue of Ukraine and the ongoing war against Ukraine and how a Ukrainian victory could be achieved. Yeah? It excluded any discussion on Russia, yeah, and how to go about it. I mean, there was a tasker in the Washington summit declaration which has not been followed through. So the alliance is still without a Russia strategy. And it also omitted a concrete, coherent plan on how Europeans and Canada actually achieve something more of a strategic responsibility in light of the anticipated US withdrawal or disengagement from Europe. So that's why I'm saying hollowness. But then the commitment to 5% GDP in itself is useful. But there's always a but. Yeah? But it's not a substitute for all those strategic issues I refer to. And when it comes to defense procurement, in fact, European dependence on the US has increased over the last decade. According to CIPRI, who did the analysis over a 10-year period, the dependence has increased to 12% from Europeans buying more material equipment from the US than before. So we're a long way to go from becoming more independent when it comes to to Europe.
I will be back to the strategic issue, in particular to Russia and Ukraine, but let's go back to the numbers. We pledged 5%, which is then split into 3.5 for defense spending on one side and another 1.5 so for broader definition of infrastructure, cybersecurity. Do you think this is a lot of labeling defense, but not really going to the defense issue, and everybody picks out things you would consider as useful?
Well, the 1.5%, which is sort of the security and defense related part of the 5% GDP, that definitely will lead to a lot of, let's say, creative accounting. I mean, Italy has already announced that a long standing project, which is a civilian project, namely a bridge to Sicily, which would cost a fortune, could easily come under this category. Yeah. But like everything in NATO, I mean, the 5% pledge, although the formulation in the declaration is somewhat firmer, I mean, they talk about allies commit to invest 5% GDP, firmer in comparison to the Wales pledge a decade ago. At the end of the day, it depends on the goodwill of allies to really sustain that. And we already see now that some will, as in the past, they will go forward and do it. Poland, the Baltics. I would now also include Germany into this group as a newcomer. But then others have even announced in the run-up to the summit that they would not feel bound by it. Spain, there was pretty much an uproar when the Spanish Prime Minister wrote to a Secretary General saying that this is not in the interest of Spain. Slovakia, and then also the US. Trump has made it clear that the 5% should concern everybody except the US. Yeah, so that's the general context. Now but in general, I mean, it's a figure on paper, and paper is patient. Yeah, and as long as it doesn't translate into more troops, more capabilities, you don't win military conflicts with figures on paper. Yeah, you win them with military capabilities. Yeah. And then also the deadline, which was agreed upon, namely until 2023, is far too late. It's far too late. Mm-hmm. We don't have that time. Yeah? There is an analysis from CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, outlining that Russian aggression against Europe has tripled from 23 to 2024. Tripled. It's still below the open war. It's still as a shadow war, but it has tripled. Mm. So we don't have until 2023 to build up our European capabilities.
You referred also to the different positions of the member states, and of course, these huge increases in spending is a domestic policy issue. Spain, others, Italy are cases, but even the debate we have in Germany, for example, is not so quite clear. So the big concern here in Europe is that are we really dedicated to maintain this huge level of spending? Do we have enough domestic support over a long time?
I think there is also for political leaders, there's fertile ground, because when I look at the latest opinion poll NATO did, it finds that 76% of allied populations are in favor of maintaining or even increasing defense spending. And then also on the Eurobarometer, or on the European side, I mean, the Eurobarometer outlined that some 80% are in favor of a stronger European role in security and defense. So there is fertile ground for political leaders to make the case. But they need to be honest, and they need to be upfront to their populations, yeah, and need to speak a clear language. Yeah. It's a distortion, like the previous Chancellor Scholz in Germany did, to talk about we are still at peace. No, we aren't. Yeah, we are in a shadow war. We are suffering from a shadow war against Russia. So I think as Europeans, we really have to realize, and our political leaders need to say this: we are not living in a petting zoo. Yeah, in a large petting zoo. I mean, the world created between Trump, Xi, and Putin is the world where the law of the jungle prevails. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we do not want to become the pawns or the play ball between those big powers, we need to build our own European strategic responsibility. Yeah? But that's the case political leaders need to make. And so far, coming back to my earlier point, so far Europe does not have yet that coherent strategy to get there.
You alluded to Russia, and I just looked in preparation of this interview to how long the war in Ukraine is already. It's 3 years, 4 months and 2 weeks. And we have seen now in the recent months a relentlessly increasing pressure on Ukraine, while the White House, at least for a certain moment, suspended some of the military shipments. So what is your outlook on the war in Ukraine? Is there any ending in sight?
Well, the war cannot end at all costs, not at the expense of Ukraine. And again, I think the context we are seeing is that Trump's initial plan to end the war in 24 hours is a fantasy. We know this. He's more working on coercing Ukraine there rather than anything else. On the Western side, Western leaders have so far done two things. I mean, they have build a scenario where they assume there will be a ceasefire or some form of peace. Yeah, but this peace may not come through. Yeah, so in many ways, I would argue that it is wiser to build a strategy which was coined a porcupine strategy for Ukraine. This terminology is also used in the recent EU white paper, which Commissioner Kubilius issued. So the idea being to fortify Ukraine to maintain its resistance and defense and deterrence vis-à-vis an ongoing Russia aggression. Because I think we need to realize that this war with Putin in power will not end anytime soon. Yeah? Because in many ways, that's also what Zelensky said at the Hague summit. Putin needs this war to maintain himself in power. Yeah? So he has no interest in ending it. Yeah? And in this context, I think we need to reconfigure, rethink the way how a theory of victory for Ukraine could look like. And incidentally, this is also something which is now picked up by a former Ukraine defense minister, who is outlining what he then calls a strategy of strategic. How did he formulate it? Of strategic of functional defeat. So the Russians cannot win in certain functional areas. So it would be a replication of the functional defeat the Ukrainians inflicted on the Russians in the Black Sea. So to repeat that in other domains, in air, sea, and land, cyberspace. Yeah? So a porcupine strategy for Ukraine with support from the West would, in my mind, be the probably most adequate way forward.
Let us look a bit beyond the theater in the East. I remember discussion in NATO, is there a global role for NATO? Is it, and you referred to the authoritarian regimes, which are a massive threat to us. So do you think there is much more to NATO than just defending the territory currently? Or should we instead focus on the Euro-Atlantic area?
Well, I don't think NATO has any ambition to become something like a global policeman. Yeah? So it will remain a Euro-Atlantic alliance. Having said that, it needs a global outlook because many of the threats and challenges are global in nature. So that also explains why the cooperation with the Indo-Pacific has increased over the past few years, actually largely since 2022. And to a large extent, it has increased to the extent that relations with China deteriorated. So they are kind of communicating tubes, if you wish. Yeah? So allies undertook a number of steps to improve the cooperation with the Indo-Pacific partners, to name them. I mean, we're talking about Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea. Whilst the the situation with China became more critical or more problematic. Yeah. So those partners have now been participating regularly in summits and ministerials. Under my chairmanship at NATO, we actually negotiated what we called individually tailored partnership programs with each and every one of them. And whilst this process was ongoing, the policy towards China became more critical. Yeah? So there is a first reference to China's coercion in the strategic concept from 2022, and then somewhat more pointedly in the summit declaration from last year, the Washington Summit 2024, where allies also make the reference to say, well, China cannot continue with its support to Russia and its partnership without limits with Russia, and support it in an important way and therefore also helping Russia to remain in the fight. So China cannot think that it can continue doing that without paying also some consequences. The problem is they put this in the summit declaration in 2024, but there hasn't been any follow-up. So,
well, that would be indeed a topic to follow up. For today, I would like to thank you very much for this very helpful insight. We are glad to have you here as an author. The topic remains because the Martin Center itself is very much focusing on defense and security in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. We will continue, of course, with discussing other topics in our series of Thinking Talks. Watch out on any news here on our webpage, martincenter.eu. Thank you very much.